So has this ever happened to you? You have a pivot table and you want to refer to a cell in the pivot table with a formula. So you say, oh, I know what I'll do. I'll just have equals, and then you click here, and then all this nonsense gets generated. Get pivot data. So for many people, this is kind of intimidating. You may see it and be like, okay, I guess that's fine. I suppose I'll hit enter, and then I'll drag this down, and this is supposed to refer to that sales column, but then you'll see, oh wait, it's referring to the same cell in every situation. It's always referring to that first one. So then you realize this is, for at least the purpose that you would imagine it for, this feels useless. This is intimidating. You don't know what it is, and you need to do calculations off of a pivot table. So what you'll do next is you'll say, oh, I know what I'll do. I'll just copy this as value somewhere, and then I'll make all my edits that way. Problem with that is you're losing kind of all the advantages of a pivot table. Don't get me wrong, sometimes that process is necessary, but if it's not necessary, it's not good to do, because what you'd rather have is formulas based off your pivot table, and then if you ever had to refresh the pivot table, all your formulas would update. So this approach is less than ideal. What you really want to do is tell Excel to have the cells in the pivot table behave like normal cells and not generate a GetPivotData situation, unless you want that kind of thing. So if you don't want it, it's very easy to turn it off. You just go to Analyze, Options, uncheck Generate GetPivotData. Now, if I have a formula referred to a cell in a pivot table, it will just act like any other cell. If I bring this down, you can see it's behaving as normal. Even if I make changes to my pivot table, let's say I sort this a different way, it will still behave, it will still update, it will work just like any cell that you would see normally in Excel, which is a great advantage. To show you an example of the kind of thing you can do, I go down here. I created this between the videos, between the last video and this one, which is just, the product lines and the years cross tabs. Very easy. If I wanted to get a percent difference between these years, I could go here and I could just type in that percent difference. Now I think get generate is on. It's not on. Good. So I'm going to say minus this divided by that, and I'll get a nice little percent difference right here. So just to illustrate what the generate get pivot data thing is for, what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly create a table that uses the generate get pivot and just show you kind of an example of what it's for. So basically I'm going to copy this and I'm going to paste it as value with formatting. Hopefully I'll lose the formatting. That's okay. I can fix that. So I'll just make this another color, and I can finish formatting it later. The important thing is what we're going to do is we're going to create this table. We're going to basically refer to this table with the GetPivotData function. And then from that point on, you'll be able to see what it's for and what are some of the advantages and actually some of the disadvantages of that approach. So what I'm going to do is, to make this work, I have to turn this back on. And then over here, I'm going to go equals. I'm going to replace this with a formula. I'm going to have it equal this cell, and it will generate GetPivotData. Okay, cool. Now you'll see the way this is, the syntax of this is, first it's indicating the data field, which is sales, and then it's going to refer to the upper left corner of the pivot table, or the cell in the upper left corner where the pivot table is anchored, and that just says pivot table. Basically it's saying this is the pivot table. So no matter where you click in the pivot table, it will put this cell up here, because that's the definition of where the pivot table lives at all times. And then over here you'll see you have the column name, which is year ID, and then the row name, which is product line, and you see the actual values for those things. You see field 1, and then you see the item in it, which is 2016. Product line is field 2, and then you see the item in it, which is classic car. There might be other filters or other issues or other things like that, but these are the only, it's a very simple example in this case. But so what I want to do is, I don't want to just leave this as it is. As I kind of showed you earlier, if I were to drag this across and down, you would find that it would keep referring only to that one number, which I really, really don't want. What I wanted to do is refer to all the numbers that are appropriate, so vintage cars or motorcycles or 2017 or what have you. So what I need to do is I need to change, when it says year ID, I need to change what it's referring to, which in this case is going to be this cell, and I'm going to lock it a specific way. You can imagine as I drag this across, I want it to move horizontally, but I don't want it to move vertically. As I drag this down, I want it to always refer to row 54. So I want to lock, I'm going to use F4 to sort of scroll through these, but I want to lock just the row. Okay, cool. And now for product line, I want it to refer to this column over here. So instead of just saying classic cars, I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to have it referred to this column, B54. I'm going to lock it by only the column, because I want it to stay on this column, but as I move it right or left, it would stay on the column, but the row can change. As I copy this up or down, or rather down, it will stay the same. So it will change along with it. So I'm going to enter, and now if I move this across and down, I have reproduced the formula. For grand total, it's a little bit different. And the way I have to do that, just, obviously I could sort of figure it out or put it in manually. What I'm going to do instead, just to make my life easier, I'm just going to say equals this, and it's going to say sales, and you can see all it's doing is filtering by the year ID. So all I have to do is adjust the year ID to be up here. I'm going to lock by row. There you go, and we have our grand total. So you see now I've created a formula system here that will refer to this pivot table. Now it's important to note that this will only refer to what's in the pivot table. You can't add other things that would filter it in ways that are not incorporated in this particular pivot table. So if there's things filtered out or things like that, this pivot table won't be, this formula won't be able to see it. So we're going to talk about formula approaches later that refer to source data that will be able to do anything a pivot table can do and more, essentially more. This is only referring to the pivot table. So you may ask, why would you do this? And in many cases you won't do this. Honestly, this is a little bit niche a feature as far as I configure it. But what I would say is that some of the advantages of it are that you have a lot more control over formatting, and you have a lot more control over adding in formulas or rows in between. So let's say you wanted to add in a row here with notes on it or something like that, or you wanted to add in a column, basically you wanted to add in like a column here with the year over year or something like that, some other piece of information. Like you wanted to insert something into this document or change the formatting in a radical way. This approach would let you do that and have a little bit more control over the appearance of it than using a traditional pivot table. So there are some values to it for sure, but I've generally found that other approaches are more interesting to me or give me more flexibility. But this is a tool available to you. Maybe as I discover more values or good examples of it on places where it shines, I can make a video in the future that will cover that in more detail. Anyway, thank you for joining us. I just wanted to cover this topic in as detailed a way as I can at this point, and I'm looking forward to teaching you more about pivot tables in the videos to come.